Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cameron Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Lindsay, back here with another episode for y'all. First off, I want to start off by saying thank you to my new subscribers that just subscribed to my channel. We're now at 105 subscribers, and my goal is to get to my new goal now is to get to at least 200, 300 subscribers by the end of this year. So, like I said, if you know somebody or you haven't subscribed yet, by the end of this episode, please subscribe to my sports podcast and some of my other social media accounts if you can. And like I said, this podcast is about my growth as a journalist / analyst, and my ultimate goal is to work for ESPN, companies like ESPN, Fox Sports, NFL Network, NBA TNT, CBS, College Football Live, big companies like that. I want to be the best. I don't just want to be a normal journalist. I want to be the best. I want to be better than Stephen A. Smith. I want to be better than Skip Bayless. I want to be better than Shannon Sharp. I want to be better than Dan Orlovsky. Journalists like that, though, are well known, and I want to be the top. I'm hungry to be the best, and I feel like this sport podcast will get me better and better and be in front of a camera, be in front of an audience. And like I said, I'm already getting comfortable each episode being in front of y'all. And y'all have really helped me do that, and I appreciate y'all. Y'all are not just fans or more than just subscribers. Y'all are family at this point. So, and I know that when I reach 1 million subscribers one day, I know who all has been through me through this journey. And this podcast is pretty much a journey. Even when I reach that goal, I'm still be doing this podcast because I love doing it, and it's my passion right now. So I want to thank y'all for that. But yes, today's episode will be about the 2023 men's NCAA tournament and on the road to the Final Four. The men's Final Four will be held in Houston, Texas, and that will be April 1st. The national championship game will be April 3rd. So we are in March Madness. So I got the bracket here. Now I started filling it out, but I haven't filled it all the way. So I'm here live to fill pretty much the rest of it with y'all live, the men's bracket. And the next episode, I'm going to be doing the women's bracket. So stay tuned for that episode. But in today's episode, we're going to be doing the men's. Now, start off with the first four in. So really the whole round is 64, but there's 4 teams that get a chance to fight to move on to the first round. So this is like kind of a play-in to get into the actual tournament. So the first we have for the South region of the bracket, we have Texas A&M CC versus Southeast Missouri State. They're both fighting for the 16th seed to face Alabama, the number 1 seed. I picked Texas A&M CC over Southeast Missouri State. In the West bracket, we have Arizona State against Nevada, both fighting for the 11th seed, and they will be both fighting against 6-seeded TCU. They're both fighting for a chance to fight TCU in the West Division bracket. And I picked Arizona State to win that matchup over Nevada. In the Midwest bracket, we have a Mississippi State versus Pitt, both fighting for the 11th seed to go up against 6-seeded Iowa State, and I picked Mississippi State to win that matchup. And now in the East bracket, we have Texas Southern from the SWAC against FDU in the East bracket, and I picked Texas Southern to beat FDU, and they will be fighting, and they will both be fighting to face the number 1 seed at Purdue, who's the number 1 seed in the East bracket. So yeah. But the first 4 matchups will be March 14th and 15th. So it's coming soon. So make sure y'all check them first 4 matchups to see if these are any of your schools, and both get a chance to fight for a chance to win a national championship in Houston, Texas, in the Final Four. But let's start off with the first round matchups, which will take place March 16th and the 17th. We have the number 1 seeded Alabama Crimson Tide against a 16th seed Texas A&M CC, and this is the South Division bracket. So right here we have the South Division bracket, and Alabama's the number 1 seed in that part of the bracket. And I have Alabama winning over 16 seeded Texas A&M CC. And next up is 8 seeded Maryland versus 19th West Virginia. Now I got heart towards WVU because I used to go to school there before I moved back down here to Georgia. So I'm gonna go with my gut, and I'm gonna go 9 seeded West Virginia over 8 seeded Maryland, and they will move on in the first round. Next up, we have the 5th seeded San Diego State versus 12 seeded Charleston. I'm gonna go San Diego State in that matchup. Next, we have 4 seeded Virginia against 13th seed Foreman. I'm gonna have Virginia over Foreman. Moving on. Number 6 seeded Creighton versus 11 seed NC State. I'm gonna go NC State with the upset over 6 seeded Creighton. We have 3rd seed Baylor versus 14 seed UCSB. I'm gonna go Baylor in that matchup. We have 7 seeded Missouri against 10 seeded Utah State. I'm gonna pick Missouri in that matchup. And we got the number 2 seeded Arizona Wildcats versus 15th seed Princeton. And I'm gonna go Arizona. So now the teams I have moving on in the South bracket are Bama, West Virginia, San Diego State, Virginia, NC State, Baylor, Missouri, and Arizona. Those are the teams that'll be moving on from the first round in the South Division bracket of the men's NCAA tournament. Now for the East bracket, we have first matchup. We have the number 1 seeded Purdue Boilermakers versus 16 seed Texas A&M. Texas Southern. Excuse me. Against Texas Southern from the SWAC. And Purdue, I have Purdue easily moving on against Texas Southern. We have 8 seeded Memphis Tigers, coached by the great Penny Hardaway, against 9th seed FAU. I have Memphis moving on. We have the 5th seeded Duke Blue Devils against 12th seed Oral Roberts. I have Duke easily winning that matchup. We have the 4th seeded Tennessee Volunteers against 13th seed Louisiana Raging Cajun. 13th seed Louisiana. I have 4th seed Tennessee winning that matchup and moving on. We have the 6th seeded Kentucky Wildcats against 14th seed Montana State. And I have Kentucky moving on. Kentucky versus Providence. And we have third seed Kansas State versus 14th seed Montana State. Excuse me for getting that mixed up. And I have Kansas State moving on against Montana State. Now, next up we have 7th seeded Michigan State versus 10th seeded USC. And I'm going to go on the upset in this and say USC beats 7th seeded Michigan State and moves on. And lastly, in the East bracket, we have number 2 seed Marquette versus 15th seed Vermont. And I'm going to easily pick Marquette over Vermont. And that concludes the first round of the East bracket of the men's 2023 NCAA tournament. Again, I'll repeat who I have moving on from the first round in the East bracket is number 1 seeded Purdue, 8 seeded Memphis, Duke, 5th seeded Duke, 4th seed Tennessee Volunteers, 6th seeded Kentucky, 3rd seed Kansas State, 10th seed USC, and number 2 seed Marquette. So those will be moving on in the second round. Let's move on to the Midwest bracket. Number 1 seeded Houston versus number 16 seed North Kentucky. I have Houston easily winning that matchup and moving on to the second round. Again, the first round is March 16th through the 17th. So we're on the Midwest bracket. We just got done doing the South bracket first round, East bracket first round. Now we're on the first round to the Midwest bracket. Again, I have number 1 seeded Houston Cougars over the 16th seed Northern Kentucky. Next up, we have number 8 seed Iowa versus number 9 seed Auburn. And I'm going to go with the Auburn Tigers to win this matchup over Iowa. Next up, we have 5th seeded Miami Hurricane against 12th seeded Drake. And I'm going to go Miami over Drake. Next up, we have 4 seeded Indiana Hoosiers over 13 seed Kent State. I'm going to go Indiana over Kent State. Next up, we have number 6 seeded Iowa State against number 11 seed Mississippi State. And I'm going to go Mississippi State. Excuse me. Next up, we have 30 seeded Xavier versus 14 seed Kennesaw State. I'm going to go Xavier over Kennesaw State. Next up, we have 7 seeded Texas A&M versus number 10 seed Penn State. Now, this matchup interested me because both teams made it to their conference final championship game. Texas A&M against Alabama, but they lost. And Penn State against Purdue, and they lost. And like I said, in my head, yesterday when the brackets got revealed, I went back and forth on this matchup. But I'm going to go in a close one. I'm going to go Texas A&M beats Penn State, and they move on in a close one. Next up, the final first round matchup in the Midwest bracket, we have number 2 seeded Texas Longhorns against 15 seed Colgate. And I'm easily go Texas over Colgate. Now, to repeat, in the Midwest bracket, I have Houston moving on over number 1 seed Houston over Northern Kentucky, 16 seed Northern Kentucky. I have 9 seed Auburn beating 8 seed Iowa. I have 5th seed Miami Hurricane beating 12 seed Drake. I have 4 seed Indiana beating 13 seed Kent State. I have 11 seed six seeded Iowa State, not Mississippi State. Excuse me on that. Iowa State over Pitt, over Mississippi State. Next up, I have 3rd seeded Xavier over 14th seed Kennesaw State. Next up, we have 7 seeded Texas A&M over Penn State. I picked Texas A&M. Number 2 seeded Texas Longhorns over 15 seed Colgate. So all the teams moving on to the second round: Houston, Auburn, Miami, Indiana, Iowa State, Xavier, Texas A&M, and Texas. So now moving on to the west side of the bracket for the first round matchup. Again, March 16th through the 17th. We have the number 1 seeded Kansas, defending champs, Kansas Jayhawks, who won it last year, against 16 seeded Howard Bisons from the MEAC. And I'm going to go Kansas over Howard easily in that matchup. We have 8 seeded Arkansas Razorbacks against 9 seed Illinois Fighting Illini. And I'm going to go Illinois in that matchup. We have 5th seeded St. Mary's versus 12th seed VCU. And I'm going to go with an upset and pick VCU over number 5 seed St. Mary's. So I'm going to go VCU and an upset over 5th seeded St. Mary's. And lastly, we have, we have 4 seeded UConn versus 13 seed, I can't pronounce it, Iona, but I'm going to go UConn in that matchup and pick them. We have 6 seeded TCU versus 11 seeded Arizona State, and I'm going to go TCU over Arizona State. We have 3rd seed Gonzaga versus 14 seed Grand Canyon. I'm going Gonzaga over them. Next up, we have 7th seeded Northwestern versus 10th seeded Boise State. I'm going Northwestern on that matchup. I have number 2 seeded UCLA and 15th seed UNC at Ash, but I'm going to go UCLA. And now that concludes the first round for the West bracket. I have number 1 seeded Kansas moving on, Illinois, number 9 seed Illinois, number 12 seed VCU over an upset over St. Mary's, UConn, number 4 seed UConn, number 6 seeded TCU, number 3 seed Gonzaga, number 7 seed Northwestern, and number 2 seed UCLA. Moving on to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Now back to the second round of our bracket, to the South bracket division. The second round begins March 18th to the 19th. And like I said, I had Bama winning, and I had West Virginia winning. So that matches up Bama versus WVU. And as much as I like West Virginia, and I love them, but I feel like that Cinderella story will end in the second round, and Bama will number 1 seeded Bama will move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we have 5th seeded San Diego State against number 4 seeded Virginia Cavaliers. And I'm going to go Virginia over San Diego State. That'd be number 4 seed. Next up, we have 11 seed NC State, which I had upsetting number 6 seeded Creighton in the first round against number 3rd seed Baylor. And NC State run is going to end in the second round, just like West Virginia. But I'm going to have Baylor winning that matchup over them. So, yeah, they will go home in the second round, and Baylor will move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, I have 7th seeded Missouri against number 2 seeded Arizona Wildcats. And I'm going to go Arizona in this matchup over number 7 seed Missouri to move on to the Sweet 16 to face Baylor. We have number 1 Purdue against the 8th seeded Memphis Tigers. And this one is a tough matchup. Part of me want to say Memphis, but you know what? I'm going to go in the upset. I'm going to pick Memphis over Purdue. I'm going to say 8th seeded Memphis shocks number 1 seed Purdue, and they move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we have number 5th seeded Duke Blue Devils against the number 4 seed Tennessee Volunteers. I'm going to go Duke because, to be honest, I think Tennessee is a bit overrated. They was a number 1 ranked team for a certain part of the season, but they started losing games they should have won. And Duke is hot. They just won the ACC tournament. And, yeah, I think Duke is on a hot streak, and I have them winning that and moving on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we have the 6th seeded Kentucky Wildcats over the number 3rd seed Kansas State Wildcats. So Wildcat against Wildcat. But I'm going to go with this matchup right here. What y'all think, y'all? But I want to say Kentucky, but I think Kansas State is going to win that matchup. I don't think Kentucky has been the same in a while. I think Kansas State beats Kentucky, and they move on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we have USC against number 2 seeded Marquette, and I'm gonna go to upset and pick USC in this matchup over Marquette. So that's the East bracket for the second round. I got Memphis upsetting Purdue, number 8 seed Memphis Tigers over number 1 seed Purdue Boilermakers. I have Duke beating Tennessee, the 5th seeded Duke Blue Devils over number 4 seed Tennessee Volunteers. Number 6 seeded Kentucky Wildcats over number 3rd seed Kansas State Wildcat. They're losing to Kansas State, so I got Kansas State beating Kentucky. I got USC upsetting number 2 seeded Marquette and moving on to Sweet 16. But yes, those are the South and East brackets of the NCAA men's tournament. Next up, we're gonna move on to the Midwest bracket. Now, second round matchup again, March 18th to the 19th is the second round matchup for the men's NCAA tournament, and this is the round of 32. So it went from 64 teams now to 32 teams. But we're now on to the Midwest bracket. We got the number 1 seeded Houston Cougars against number 9 seeded Auburn, and I got Houston winning over Auburn, moving on to the Sweet 16. We got the 5th seeded Miami Hurricanes against the 4th seeded Indiana Hoosiers. And I'm going to go Miami over Indiana. Next up, we have the 6th seeded Iowa State Cyclones against the number 3rd seed Xavier. And I'm going to go Xavier in this matchup. Obviously, Xavier wins against Iowa State. Moving on to the Sweet 16. We have the 7th seeded Texas A&M. Texas A&M over number 2. We have against number 2 seeded Texas Longhorns. Number 7 seed Texas A&M Aggies versus number 2 seeded Texas Longhorns. And I'm gonna go Texas over Texas A&M because Texas is also hot and they just won the Big 12, the men's Big 12 tournament over the defending champs, Kansas Jayhawks. And that will conclude the Midwest bracket. I have Houston over Auburn, Miami over 5th seeded Miami over number 4 seed Indiana, number 6 seeded Iowa State over losing to number 3 seeded Xavier. I have number 2 seeded Texas over number 7 seed Texas A&M. And now we're moving on to the West bracket of the second round. Again, March 18th to the 19th. This will be the number 1 seeded Kansas Jayhawks, the defending champs, against the number 9 seeded Illinois Fighting Illini. And I will go Kansas over them. Moving on to the Sweet 16. Then we'll have number 12 seeded VCU against UConn. Now, I had UConn upsetting St. Mary's, I know 5th seed, but I feel like their journey ends there, and UConn will move on to the Sweet 16 to face Kansas. And that will be a very interesting matchup right there, which we will get to when we get to our predictions for the Sweet 16. Number 6 seeded TCU against number 3rd seed Gonzaga. And I'm going to go Gonzaga over TCU. Lastly, we have number 7 seed Northwestern Wildcats against number 2 seed UCLA Bruins. And I'm going UCLA over Northwestern to move on to the Sweet 16. So like I said, that concludes the second round of the West bracket. I have Kansas, UConn, Gonzaga, and UCLA all moving on to the Sweet 16 in that bracket. So now it's time to get to the Elite Eight, the next round. And the Elite Eight is March 25th to the 26th. And we're back to the South bracket of the men's NCAA tournament. So I'm going to go number 1 seeded Bama over number 4 seeded Virginia Cavaliers. So I'm going to say Alabama moves on to the Elite Eight over number 4 seeded Virginia. Next up, we have number 3rd seed Baylor over number 2 seed Arizona. And I'm going to go Arizona over Baylor. Moving on to that. That's the two teams I have moving on to the Elite Eight from the South bracket. So I have number 1 Bama against number 2 seeded Arizona. Now moving on to the East bracket, I have number 8 seeded Memphis Tigers against number 5th seeded Duke. And I have Duke beating Memphis, moving on to the Elite Eight. Next up, we have the 3rd seeded Kansas State Wildcats against 10th seeded USC. And I'm going to go USC in the upset and say USC beats Kansas State and moves on to the Elite Eight. So that concludes the East bracket. Again, I have Duke beating the 8th seeded Memphis Tigers and number 10 seeded USC beating the 3rd seed Kansas State Wildcats. Now moving on to the West bracket, we have number 1 seeded Houston Cougars against the 5th seeded Miami Hurricane, and I have Houston moving on beating Miami. So I have them moving on to the Elite Eight. I have number 3rd seeded Xavier against number 2 seeded Texas. And I got Texas beating Xavier, moving on to the Elite Eight against Houston. Next up, we have the number 1 seeded defending champs Kansas Jayhawks against number 4 seeded UConn. And I'm going to have to go with Kansas over UConn, and I feel like Kansas will beat UConn and move on to the Elite Eight. We have number 3rd seeded Gonzaga against number 2 seeded UCLA. And I'm going to go Gonzaga over UCLA. Moving on to the Elite Eight. So, from the West Division, I have Kansas, number 1 seed Kansas beating number 4 seed UConn. I have number 3rd seed Gonzaga beating number 2 seed UCLA. And both will move on to the Elite Eight. So, we're getting closer towards the end of this men's tournament bracket. And moving on to the Final Four. We're about to move on to the Final Four, but the Elite Eight is March 25th to the 26th. So we have the number 1 seeded Alabama Crimson Tide from the South bracket against number 2 seeded Arizona Wildcats, also in the South bracket. And I have Bama beating Arizona to move on to the Final Four. And from the East bracket, in Elite Eight, we have the 5th seeded Duke Blue Devils against the number 10 seeded USC Trojans. And I have Duke beating USC over US. I have Duke beating USC from the East bracket, moving on to the Final Four to face Alabama. To the Midwest bracket, we have the number 1 seeded Houston Cougars against number 2 seeded Texas Longhorns. Excuse me. And I'm going to go Texas in an upset, and I'm going to pick Texas over Houston to represent the Midwest in the Final Four. So, number 2 seeded Texas Longhorns will upset the number 1 seeded Houston Cougars to move on to the Final Four. And now to the West bracket, we have number 1 seed Kansas Jayhawks against number 3rd seed Gonzaga Bulldogs. And I'm gonna go Kansas in this matchup. I'm gonna go Kansas. Kansas will go back-to-back years making it to the Final Four, and they will beat Gonzaga. So in my Final Four, I have Bama, Duke, Texas, and Kansas. Now, the men's Final Four will be April 1st. So, both games will be April 1st. And the national championship game will be April 3rd. So, yeah, now let's get to the Final Four predictions. So, we have Alabama from the South bracket playing the number 1 seed, playing the number 5th seed Duke Blue Devils from the East bracket. And I'm going to go Alabama over Duke. And Alabama will punch their ticket to the national championship game. Now, who do I have? Alabama facing number 2 seeded Texas and number 1 seeded Kansas. Now, Texas is number 2, which if y'all don't know, Texas beat Kansas in the men's Big 12 tournament final. And it was a close game. So, but in this instance, I'm going to go with, from watching that game, I'm going to go with, I feel like Texas will upset Kansas and beat them again and face Alabama in the national championship game. So, just like how we had in football, Alabama and Texas played each other in football, and they're going to play each other in basketball, but this time for the men's 2023 national championship. So I have Bama and Texas facing each other in the national championship game in Houston, April 3rd. And for my prediction, I'm going to go with Alabama over Texas winning it all. So that's what I have. I have Alabama over Texas. And Alabama will be your 2023 men's national champions of college basketball, of men's college basketball. So, but yeah, what I think of this year's tournament, I feel like there's really no team that in the men's that really stands out to me. Like I feel like there's really no favorite. I kind of feel like it's wide open. But for watching it, I think the reason I got Alabama winning it because I feel like their freshman star Brandon Miller. He's 6'9". He's a great shooter, a pretty good defender, and I feel like this tournament is going to be a way he can solidify himself as a top 3 pick in the NBA draft. And I feel Alabama has pretty much been the most consistent at number 1 for the most part. But there's still some teams that can still challenge Alabama. So that's why I say no particular team really stands out the most. I guess you could say Alabama, but yeah, but like I said, that's what the reason they call this March Madness, because it'd be madness. A lot of upsets happen. Like I said, in the first round, I have USC beating Marquette. I have VCU beating St. Myers. And I have NC State beating number 6 seeded Creighton. So it's a pretty good upsets I have in the first round. And it's going to happen. It's going to be a lot of brackets. Even my bracket may be busted the first round, the first day. So don't get mad if your bracket gets busted the first day. It happens. That's why they call it March Madness for the reasons, because it's a lot of madness that happens in the month of March, leading up to early April in the Final Four in the national championship game. So if you haven't filled out your bracket yet, do it early today or tomorrow, because the first 4 begins tomorrow. And yeah, so that way you can have time before March 16th when the first round begins from each brackets: the South, the Midwest, the East, and the West bracket. So first round begins March 16th to the 17th. So remember that. But like I said, I really appreciate y'all tuning in with this episode with me, filling in my bracket with y'all live. And let me know what y'all think. Comment, like, share all over social media. Let me know what y'all think, who y'all got in y'all Final Four, any upsets y'all have. I'm really intrigued to listen to what y'all have. And the more and more y'all keep subscribing, I feel like eventually I want to do something for a special subscriber or anybody that's really been tuning in to my episodes and interviews I do. And I really appreciate y'all. Like I said, my goal is to be the best journalist for ESPN, Fox Sports, College Football Live, MLB Network, any of those top companies. I want to be the best, and I feel like y'all, my family, will help me get there and get better as I go on. Like I said, nobody's perfect, and each episode, I know I always make mistakes, but I try to correct that and keep working on it, and see what I need to do to improve each show for y'all. And yeah, so I really appreciate y'all tuning in to this episode, doing the 2023 men's NCAA tournament bracket. Like I said, next episode is going to be the women's 2023 NCAA bracket. And I'll catch y'all then. Y'all stay tuned. And yeah, y'all stay blessed. Thank you.